Oh, sure, go for it.
So we're now recording live. Yeah, so I met him. He came to a pitch off. It's called Pitch Perfect at an incubator in town where my school is.
Mhm.
Drove, it was like 45 minutes from Richmond, took the drive out, and he pitched his company. And it was really, really impromptu kind of pitches. People were just coming up, and it was like a chance for startup founders to do their pitch and get feedback on it for like the big time show when they're actually pitching to investors and stuff. So this is just, like an incubator putting it on just to practice and help people hone their pitches down. And Elliot's pitch was just like perfect. Like the only person that presented that had like a streamlined pitch and knew exactly what his product was. He knew, exactly what to say, the stuff to leave in and the stuff to leave out, in a 90-second pitch or whatever. So I went up to him after and we chatted a little bit then and told him I had a podcast and we had to, stay connected. I wanted to get on the show. So
cool.
Yeah, it just took off from there. But yeah, he's crazy, man. We call him the mad scientist on the show here.
Nice. Yeah, I caught a few minutes of his. I don't know. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I caught a few minutes. So it's cool to get caught up on kind of what he's doing. And I have this kind of Slack channel that various people like join and chat, like share articles and stuff within, and he's in that. And he puts good stuff in there. So
sweet.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, he's crazy, man. What's the Slack channel? Is like a
it's called it's called the Syndicate, and it's just a random Slack channel that I have, but it's called Syndicate. What gave you the idea? Tell me a bit about the podcast. Like, how long have you been doing it, and like what gave you the first idea? I had a podcast in very early days of podcasting.
Really?
About a TV show, but yeah.
Wow, can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, totally. When I was in middle school, like right when iTunes came out, I started like a podcast about the TV show House with some friends. And we were picking TV shows, and I kind of got inspired by this one about 24, which was like my favorite show. And we couldn't do that because there was already a podcast about it, so we ended up picking House, which was okay. Yeah, it's just like a bunch of people in my basement. Actually, it was mostly this room that I'm sitting in now. And the funny thing about it is we had like a decent listenership in America. And then a couple of years after we stopped doing it, they started to syndicate the shows in India. And we had like 5 or 6 times the amount of listens there. And I had forgotten pretty much about the project and then checked the kind of the statistics at one point and just noticed this enormous spike. I was like, what is happening? That was kind of funny.
That's hilarious. So it stopped. The popularity was like dead here, but it like trickled over to India and they have 3 times as many people. So
I don't know if exactly. I don't know if, I guess it was just the population was so much larger or something, or maybe they like the show more. I don't know. Listenership was okay here. I think we had, we were definitely on the top 100 for a little while. I think we had like 15,000 listeners or something, but then it went way up at that point. So yeah.
And you were in middle school at the time?
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. Cause you said at the beginning stages of podcasting, and that was like at least 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So what made you decide to even create a podcast, whether it be 24 House? Like, how did you want to do that?
I was always just working on like crazy projects. I guess so. I was interested in music and just playing guitar and like getting little bands together. And kind of through that process, I got interested in the recording and audio recording and production side. And that led me into podcasting for a little while, and we did a few of those episodes, and it's just pretty fun, get to get a group together. You have to convince everybody. There's like good collaboration kind of side, because in organization, herding cats, getting people to show up at your house, make sure they all watch the show ahead of time, and then you've got kind of the hosting piece, I guess, but then the editing piece after was cool, and then the distribution and like marketing it and stuff. It was just kind of a fun way to kind of express the entrepreneurial side, I suppose.
Yeah, early on too. Do you remember? Is the show still active now? Can listeners go check it out?
It's pretty much totally offline. I don't even know if you can find it anymore. But it was called the House Report. I think there's maybe just some remnant logos left on Google Images or something. But yeah, nothing. I took it off at one point. I'm pretty sure that the way it went offline is I like forgot about the online. So like I just forgot about the service that was syndicating it, and then I'm pretty sure that I lost the files at one point when I like transferred a hard drive or something, which is kind of a bummer. I actually kind of wish I still had those. But I'm pretty sure that I've lost them. That might be a project for one day to see if I could dig all those up.
Yeah, all these middle school things. I just actually, that's funny you mentioned that, because I actually just reached out to my middle school like tech person, because I made this totally badass campaign video with a bunch of my friends. I remember back in the day, like seventh grade, for vice president or president, whatever, of our middle school, and all of our friends were involved, and it was like this Godfather sploof where like, it was like me and a bunch of my friends, part of like the mafia, and we were telling the school to like vote for for me as the vice president. It was
nice.
The cheesiest thing ever, but we were all wearing like full suits. They were way too big for us because we were like 12 or 13 and had like these cheesy New York accents. And
that's awesome.
I really want to dig that video up because it would be hilarious. And same with your stuff. But I think those kind of projects, like starting a podcast when you're 12 or 13 or whatever it was, is like a lot of kids just have cool ideas, but starting them is the challenging part for any idea, right? Kid or adult, but you have those like entrepreneurial roots from even back then. Was there anything else that you did growing up that was kind of like that, just starting something on your own?
Yeah, there was actually, I have a lot of weird little stories. My problem is not necessarily being like fearful of starting projects. The problem is that I have too many things that I want to do, and they tend to conflict, or the time just gets distributed across all of them too equally, and so not any particular one of them tended to gain any huge kind of success. So that's something that in more recent years I've tried to just focus in on. I still suffer from it, but just trying to focus more in on specific initiatives and projects, and more single tasking versus multitasking, maybe serial, not parallel entrepreneurship. Anyway, so when I was 3, what I would do, for some reason, I got the idea to like sell snowballs to my neighbors, and like it was the middle of a blizzard.
What?
I grew up same sort of area, so like it was like not actively a blizzard, I guess it had just finished it, but there was snow everywhere basically. Is the way to that. And I guess I just put a bunch of snowballs, like I made some snowballs, put them in this red flyer wagon, and just went door to door like trying to sell these snowballs. I think I tried to sell it for like $1, and I just like fundamentally did not understand supply and demand, because I'm pretty sure
everywhere.
Exactly, yeah. At one point, like I think a guy opened the door and like just reached down into the snow and just held one in front of my face, and like they were all nice. I was just 3, but that was my first failure. And then I think at one point my dad bought me like a Dremel, and I was like the next day I was like, there was a line of kids like in the front of my house, and my parents were like, what is going on? And I was just grinding the rust off my friends' like bike wheels and stuff for loose change. And I guess that was actually like a profitable business endeavor. One of the weirder things that I did though, also in middle school, was, do you remember like the cicadas? The cicadas that would like kind of raid everything. So, people would like eat them and stuff, or just do weird things. So what I would do is like, I got that little 8-year-old there was like this cohort of like young kids that would run around our neighborhood. And I sort of convinced them to collect a bunch of dead cicadas and then pluck off all of the wings and just bring them to give them to me.
Give you the wings?
Yeah, just give me the wings. And then I would glue them to buttons and sell them as like Christmas ornaments.
Nice.
And I made like a few $100s doing this, and I bought like a nice guitar and things with the proceeds, which sort of led into the music stuff. And we kind of talked about that a bit. But I was always doing super weird stuff along those lines.
Yeah, that's a crazy hack, man. Like,
I recently noticed the thread though between all of the things that I do. It's like this idea of like doing more with less. So taking something that seems not valuable, like a resource like cicada wings or whatever, and then basically trying to figure out a way to like make that valuable into some sort of like useful like product or service. So that's like kind of like the lens that I find myself seeing things. And the same is true with like what I do now with BetaBox. We take these shipping containers and make those into labs and I find that as like an interesting thread. I think everyone has those like little threads that like their unique perspective as to like how they approach an industry or a market.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of important to recognize what those threads are for like you in particular, I think.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that entrepreneurs either struggle with or should have, and more of that is like just that introspection that like understands exactly what is the commonality between what they do, and then really focusing on that and not focusing about all these other things they can do, but what is actually like the part that creates the most outcome, right? So that's really cool though that you came to that realization and you even did it when you were a kid, just this with the Cicada wings. So like if you would like put red color food dye on the snowballs or something, like maybe you could have sold them for 50 cents
Right.
or something. You were 3 though, so I don't know if you would have had access to colored food dye or even the economic knowledge, like you said, of supply and demand. But you figured it out early on enough when you were 12 or 13 or whatever. With Cicada wings. That's genius, man. That's
people thought it was so weird. I got like a weird like the bug guy reputation for like a few months. That didn't really help my social standing, but that's okay.
You got a guitar out of it, so it was all worthwhile.
True. Yep.
So let's get into BetaBox a little bit. What is BetaBox Labs?
Mm-hmm. So basically, what we do is we like manufacture and operate rapid prototyping labs that are based in shipping containers. So they're like these 25-foot long like lab facilities like filled with technology, 3D printing, laser cutting, 3D scanning, vacuum forming, all the tools you need to sort of bring a new product into existence. There's also like Internet of Things equipment, a whole bunch of cool tools in there. And what the majority of what we do is we run like educational programs out of these labs. And so a school or a company can basically say, hey, we want a workshop, or we're doing a hackathon, or we have this project, we need some technology for it. And they can just rent one of these facilities from us like on demand. So basically you can say, I need an advanced rapid prototyping lab next Thursday for a project, and then it'll be there ready to go. It will also be staffed with kind of a BetaBox expert to help you. And then we'll also kind of on top of that actually do experiences. So a big thing with schools is, they may want some of these pieces of equipment, but they also don't necessarily have the knowledge to implement like a program. So they can choose a specific experience, like a BetaBox experience from our website or like from us directly. So we've got like manufacturing oriented experiences where students can learn about the equipment to actually make things. We've got like a toy adaptability experience where students learn about electronics by like adapting toys into basically toys that are accessible for students with physical disabilities. We've got lots of design thinking workshops and design sprint type stuff that we do. We're getting into more life sciences oriented programming. And so basically you can sort of add these. You can say, oh, I don't want just the lab. I also want like 100 students to like learn about like life sciences and how these tools apply to that. So that's like a majority of what we do right now. And we do that mostly throughout the Southeast. But we have this like we have like a much broader kind of roadmap around what we do just now. But.
Sure. Yeah. And I'd love to get into the episode a little, but so basically it's a shipping container that's like a school on wheels with a tech lab, and it has all these tools people can learn, and students or teachers can teach students how to create things and how to learn different sciences on a more hands-on approach than like spreadsheets or worksheets in a classroom, right? Where you're like watching PowerPoint or whatever it used to be when we were kids, right? So
yeah, totally.
That's awesome, man. How did you come up with the inspiration for that? I mean, that's a pretty, like, this is not just like some like side project thing. This is like a very big idea. And I think it's fascinating. It's what interests me so much about it. Like, this is pretty revolutionary. Where did that idea come from?
Look, it kind of came as somewhat of an accident at first, or somewhat as a side thing. For the longest time, the actual BetaBox thing itself was this like thing that like made money, but we didn't think it was going to be like the long-term thing. So we really started it as a consultancy that was creating maker spaces for universities. So universities would call us up and say, hey, we want a makerspace in this building that we're creating, but we have no idea how to pull that off. Our architecture firm has no idea how to pull that off. We need some help. And I had made a makerspace at my school, and it was kind of a natural thing to start doing that for universities. We did 3 of those projects, and it sucked working with universities. It's very slow in that particular context. It was slow, and then you had this consistent pattern that would emerge where we noticed that there was always one evangelist in the organization. So there was always some person that really understood the value of a makerspace, why it could be a beneficial thing for the student population, and they really wanted it, but of course they did not have the funding to actually greenlight such a project. Mm-hmm. And they had a boss or a provost or somebody that was kind of the keeper of the funds, and that person was like always skeptical. And so that person had to be persuaded by the internal evangelist to actually get this thing started, this program started. And we realized it would be great if we could offer this evangelist like a sales tool to their provost to basically show that, hey, this is a valuable thing. Students are going to love it. We should do it. And one day we put a bunch of our tools in a shipping container, drop it off at the University of Chapel Hill, and it worked great. Like all of the people that were involved in the budgeting decision for this new potential makerspace at a library were able to experience and see how students would be using it, what clubs might be interested. And they said, you know what, okay, this makes sense. And then pretty soon after that, they had greenlighted a large project to implement a makerspace that we were involved with. And it did sort of succeed as this like clever sales tool to basically give people a taste of what it was like before they made a massive investment. But we realized through doing that, that's like just a huge problem in general for companies and organizations, where you've got this like CapEx problem where you've got a limited budget and you need to get all this advanced stuff to basically get a program beginning or rolling, and you're not sure if it's going to work. And that lends itself to more of a lease on demand type model. Mm-hmm. But it's sort of difficult operationally to set all this stuff in a short-term way. And that's why we sort of came up with this like shipping container concept. So that's where it started. It's like a use case within universities, but since then it's expanded into a lot of other things. So we do lots of stuff in K-12. We've also done hackathons. We do recruiting stuff. So like Texas Instruments uses our labs to do recruiting. So they have like a manifest of like 10 schools, and then we put their branding on it, drop it off on campuses, and then they do hackathons out of it to sort of assess talent instead of just having a booth at a career fair. And then another really cool thing we do is we partner with design firms to do in the field consumer co-creation for like larger companies. So a lot of packaging stuff and like some pharmaceuticals and medical device projects. So an example would be, like a consumer packaged goods company wants to create a new piece of packaging for like a line of chips, right? Then basically our design firm partner drops a lab off in the middle of some public place or like a Target parking lot, and they can have real consumers come in. They can see the test packaging that they're working on. They can make suggestions and rapidly improve and iterate on those suggestions, present new prototypes, and over like a 2 to 3 day period, come to some conclusions or decisions about what direction they want to go with the packaging, and then they have all these like design files and physical prototypes that they can take back to their organization. So in that use case, BetaBox is really a way to like accelerate the innovation process.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome. We just talked with Regina Vatterrad, who's the founder of Elligrid, which is like a pillbox, and they kind of did that, but they did it. They struggled to do it like independently because they were just going out in the park and like having people test with it and stuff. Yep. So, and getting live feedback, they open it this way and not this way and things like that. I think that is a genius way to utilize BetaBox and the infrastructure you have in place is actually like the hands-on product testing that you can't get from Kickstarter review or some of the other, online programs where you get really good feedback, but not the tangible stuff for a live product or a live design. But that, okay, I want to back up to the part, because I think with all your cool ideas and where it's come since, I don't want it to get lost in translation here, but you started basically with the universities, right? And wanting to be a consultant that would go in and build out a space within the university, like take a classroom and build it into a makerspace that students could come learn in on campus, right? Like a built-in unit in one of the halls, right? And because of how hard it is to get funding and get things improved in university systems, it was tough for whoever initially brought you in or whoever was really interested in it that you called the evangelist to sell it to the head of the department or the provost or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of you just saying, okay, well, I guess this isn't going to work because we can't get past the bureaucracy here, you decided to help create the value in that marketplace that you initially tried and solve the problem, right? You said, okay, well, we'll just make them want it and we'll bring it to you. And then they won't have a choice, right? They'll see the value in it. And it ended up turning into the product that you now have, which is BetaBox Labs, having the actual mobile units. So I think that's really, really powerful as an entrepreneur, just to be able to roll with the punches, obviously, but creating opportunity from roadblocks. And you never know what that solution might turn into. In this case, it turned into BetaBox Labs, right? I mean, it wasn't just a technique to help the bureaucracy funnel through things, but it became like your actual product. That's genius. At what point did you say, okay, this isn't so much like a prototype anymore, like this is the actual thing?
Right. Oh, the lab itself. I mean, we really,
the lab itself.
We constantly see our labs as like concept prototypes. Like actually we see all of them as prototypes. Like every rental is an opportunity to improve kind of like our operations system. And then each lab that we make is a new iteration of what the idea is. But if I could pick a specific kind of transition point between like, okay, this is kind of a prototype to this is more of a real thing, it's when we made the decision early, like actually around this time last year to actually I'm saying the word shipping, I'm saying shipping containers, but actually our main platform is, we have two designs now. So one is still in shipping containers and one is actually a total from scratch design. It's, if you were to go on the kind of website and see the main picture that we use, it's that one. And we decided that we really wanted to like invest in developing a from scratch, like brand new class of mobile facility. So on the kind of right-hand side of this kind of spectrum that I will draw out here on facilities, you've got trailers, these like flimsy, like horrible, small, congested, like facilities that are not a positive experience to actually be inside at all if you're actually trying to work. You know, they're designed for having equipment moved around, right? But they're very good at moving around, and they're easy to hitch to a truck and drive to another location. And like, that's what they're designed for. That's what you have on one side of this kind of spectrum that I'm painting here. On the other side, you have actual like lab facilities where you've got all of your equipment in a beautiful glass building, and it's obviously fixed in place, but it's an incredibly, you know, positive experience to be inside. It allows you to, you know, have access to all the tools that you need, but then also, like, I don't know, just like a safe space that's like heated and air conditioned, has internet and all the basic things you'd expect from a building, but they're also very high cost. And what we were attempting to do with this new design is strike basically a balance between the mobility of a trailer, but the feel and functionality of an actual facility. And it took us kind of a few months to build and create this facility, but we call it BXB. That's the name of the thing, and it lifts up and down on its own. So it has a hydraulic system that allows the whole thing to raise up about 18 inches on these wheels, and it can get pulled down the road. But then when it parks, it drops to the ground. The wheels kind of get covered, and then all of the things that make it look like a trailer sort of disappear, and then you're left with this thing that looks very much like a small building. And it doesn't even feel like a trailer. It's got like wood floors inside, its own internet, it has solar panels, battery banks. The whole thing can get its own power for about 3 days. And so it's like this, it really does feel like a building. And I guess that would be the transition where we went from, hey, this is just like a real thing. And now it's actually a new class of approved vehicle, basically registered with the DMV. So it's that's kind of like from an engineering perspective, the main kind of differentiator or innovation that we have is this custom type of facility that nobody else exactly has or can offer.
Right. And wow, that's crazy. I hadn't, the hydraulic wheels and moving around and stuff, it sounds like you're dropping a robot off and it's just doing its thing. So how
We
did
have considered putting a robot arm in the roof, by the way. We may do this. We may do this at one point, but that's actually kind of we can touch on that when we talk more about like the roadmap, I suppose.
Okay, so yeah, before we get to that roadmap, I want to dive a little bit deeper into the roadmap from just a trailer where you had some tools that you're putting in there to this product now where it's like fully functional and feels like a lab facility and everything. What were the steps that you had to take? I'm sure there was a bunch, but how did you plan that out from like a project planning point of view? How did you decide where to go?
Yeah, so it started with okay, yeah. So like kind of taking like pivoting the question a little bit and then jumping into that. Basically, one philosophy that we have is only ever optimize or for like the next order of scale. It's like adding 1 0, not 100. So what that kind of means is if you're a web developer and you're trying to build an application, but it doesn't exist at all yet, design it for just one person, right? First design it for you, and then once you think this is kind of okay, and almost every single time the answer is is like some sort of spreadsheet or type form or something really simple that like or like a Zap or IFTTT integration or something. Like designing something just for you, it's almost always a 1 hour project that will basically accomplish what you want. Maybe that's a hacked together collection of other apps or a to-do list, something. Or like one I did recently was I have this cool kind of productivity hack where I'll set a timer for the time that I want to go to sleep. And it's sitting in my notifications bar on my phone, so I know how many hours I have left in the day. And like it's just like a very motivating thing to be like, oh, you have 6 hours before you have to go to sleep. And so it's like, what can I accomplish in 6 hours? It's like I just kind of like it as like a productivity hack, and like I didn't like try to find an app and like hire like a developer to make that thing because it's only I use it, right? So I just use my timer on my phone. But like that's an example. And so once you have a thing that works for just you should try to don't design it for 100 people or 1 million people. Just design it for like 10 people. Okay. So like, how can 10 people use this thing, right? How could I make this like, I'm just using this productivity app idea as an example, but like, how could I 10 people utilize this, right? And then maybe that's like a blog post or something. Maybe you just write a blog post about, hey, here's like my experience with like this neat little productivity hack, and people will read it, and then maybe they'll do the same thing on their phone, right? And then let's say you get good feedback from that blog post.
Hey, Sean, I'm sorry to cut you. Can I pause you real quick?
Sure.
Someone's calling me on Google. Okay, you're on a roll. So you're writing a blog post for...
Yeah, so you write the blog post, and let's say you get some positive feedback on this idea. Oh, wow, like this is a really cool productivity hack. It'd be awesome if there was like an app or something. And then you got to think, okay, well, like, let's say that you want to continue to work on this. How can I make this go from something that works for 10 people? Let's say it's the blog post to 100 people. And maybe that's some, basic, 100 people, you might be getting to like a basic functional app, or maybe it's just like a website or something that sends emails, right? Maybe that's easier than an app. So maybe you make a little website and then it's like shoots people email reminders. Like, I don't know what it is. But then it's, okay, that works great. Then 1,000 people, then 1,000 to 10,000. That's like a iterative way to come up with these things. And it's a lot different than saying, okay, I have this idea, and instead of just doing all those incremental steps, I'm going to immediately build a very, very, very robust native web application or native maybe Android or iOS or whatever, like app to like accomplish this thing that's going to like be able to work and have a huge backend that like will scale to billions of people. No, you're going to waste all your money because you're not going to build the right thing, right? We all know this. But like, it's amazing, like how no one still does this. Like no one, even though we all read all these books about iteration and everything, like no one actually really does it. So we did the same thing, but we did it in like this large, like semi-industrial hardware world with the BetaBoxes. Like the first one was, like the first one was in a room somewhere. We just set up some tools in a room to see like what the layout was. The next one was, and then we were like, okay, this works. The next one was we like tried it at this startup weekend where we got a container and just put a bunch of tools inside and didn't think about it at all. And then the one after that was we put some drywall up in the container and some whiteboards, and then we rented it to UNC that time. We just kind of kept making one specific facility a little bit better. And then we decided, and then we kind of hit this point where like we actually kind of wanted to make it a product. So we made it kind of good enough for that experience. But the problem was the container worked really well to like showcase what the offering was, but like the operation side was very, very messy. So it was very hard to move them around. And we noticed an initial assumption that the business was wrong. We thought people would rent it for multiple weeks, but people really wanted it for just a day or two, the experiences, right? And it ended up being the thing where we were spending like 2-3 hours to set something up in the beginning of a day and like 2-3 hours to take it down. It was really expensive to move it around. And while people loved the like product experience, like once the event or the rental got rolling, people had a great time in it. And we had a very high sort of like customer rebooking rate. People really wanted to keep getting it. We're just killing ourselves on the operations. It was just so brutal and like time consuming, stressful, and expensive. And we kind of made this decision where, okay, so people love this thing, right? But it really sucks to operate, right? Just in the same way that people love your app idea or whatever, but it like is very, very messy on the back end and like lots of technical debt. It's the same kind of thing. It's okay, so like let's invent a new facility that basically makes our lives easier to operate the thing that we already know works, right? So, I hired so I have a mechanical engineering background, and then I hired another mechanical engineer, and then we have an architect on the team too. And we kind of worked together to do the design, and we just invested a ton of time in the design, and then we started actually building it. So then I cropped out a budget and just started buying steel and just getting everything set up in our warehouse, and spent the early part of this year going from pretty much January to March just building it, and the first one, and then put that out there in the world. And is very stressful. We had a very limited timeline, and I had booked in it like all of April. I had booked with rentals for this lab. Like I booked rentals that only this kind of lab could do, because there was like multiple moves throughout. They were throughout like various parts of the Southeast, and there was like multiple moves, and it's very complicated. And it was the kind of thing where we knew we would basically make no money, and it'd be really a hard month if we had to use the existing kind of container lab. So we put a lot of risk on basically making sure that this brand new type of thing that we were building from scratch would like operate perfectly the first time. And that's like a stressful situation. And actually we finished it the night before we had to ship it for the first rental. And it wasn't even like totally finished. There was still some stuff that we had to kind of cut corners on to get it done. And I was literally like installing the floor 1.5 hours before we had to pick it up, like and ship it to this first customer, this school in North Carolina. And it was insane. And it broke on the way. So we have this particular type of like suspension system that like wasn't greased properly on the way. So we had to that was the only rental we've ever had to like postpone or anything aside from like snow. Or we were even late to.
And it was the very first one, so
it was the very first one with the new lab, yeah.
Through all of those, crank it in the middle of the night and putting the floor together an hour before, figured out the process. So it just became, sorry to cut you off here, but I think it's interesting, and it's really cool that the product was great for the customers, the clients that were actually using it. The pain points were more from the operations side. It was either too costly or it didn't really make sense from an operations standpoint. So you figured if we just create this one type right now and really make it like, streamlined, and then just find clients that can work in this kind of space, and then we can really like refine our processes. That was kind of the mindset.
Yeah, it's like make it work, make people like it, even if it's super messy to deliver, and then like optimize and chip away at making it more efficient later. Like sometimes I try to give like software analogies and stuff, just because that's probably a more common thing that listeners might be working on. But it's just like make it make it like the concierge model, right? Like make like just have some like be your back end, right? Be a human, like if it's doing the things in the back, right? Until people actually like the experience, and then figure out, okay, how do I make software do this so my life is easier?
Yeah, I think that a lot of entrepreneurs, myself included, sometimes get in the mindset of like, let's just optimize the hell out of it in the beginning. Let's get a system in place that can schedule our podcast meetings for us and all this stuff. When in reality, it's you don't know exactly how the system's going to work until you start doing it yourself, and then you back into it.
Yeah, it's definitely an art. It's
Hmm.
it's an art at every scale. Like it never gets easier to know when do I build for scale and when do I build for like just testing. And it is this like constant tug and balance. I think that's part of the that specific skill set around knowing when is it good to build a little bit more for scale versus just try to test stuff out is one of those intangible things that one of those intangible sort of gut things that founders, that good ones kind of know, or you develop or hone over time. But it's not, I'm not saying it's like an intrinsic thing, but it's a thing that you kind of develop and know how to sense or make those decisions. And it's not the kind of thing that you can learn without actually doing it. There's a lot of those kind of skills, but that's one of them.
Right. Man, this story is getting better and better the more I hear. Just picking your brain is really cool. And I think our listeners are going to get a lot out of it too. So, okay, so you developed this first lab, you implemented it. Floors might have been a little rocky when they got there,
Yeah.
but what was next? What was the next scaling point from those initial clients where you had this one build out?
Yeah. So the next sort of challenge that we started to pick away at, and then this is pretty recent. This is pretty recent history that we're telling this story. Now I'm in the April, March of 2016 sort of time frame, just for context. But the next sort of challenge was making sure that we could up our utilization of numbers of the fleet. So that's like a sales problem, right? So now we have more capacity, we have um, more facilities, and so we can book more days and everything. But we need to make sure that we're effectively kind of selling into that capacity. And jumping over more to the sales side to think about how we like market and sell our product. I mean, we get a lot of stuff we do get a lot of inbound stuff, just people that find out about it, that are interested, tons of word of mouth. We realize that like every BetaBox rental on average leads to 2 more sales, because we like book tours and people show up and they experience it. They understand what it actually is, because it is somewhat hard to get a sense or wrap your head around, okay, what actually is this thing before you kind of experience it. So we started to do more with getting people to show up for tours. And then we really started to strike a vein we solved a specific sales problem that has ended up being a huge win for us. So basically everyone at every school, pretty much for the most part, I shouldn't say totally, but for the most part, schools really like the BetaBox and really love the hands-on experience and how effective it can be, and how they can kind of fit into curriculum if they want, or make it more open-ended. They like how we do all of the complicated operation stuff and maintain the equipment, and it's just sort of ready to go. They really like the BetaBox. Almost none of them have money to pay for it, to actually rent it. So that's like a key challenge in the education stuff that we do.
And these are like elementary schools now, or are we talking colleges still?
It's all over the place, more in K-12 now. So,
Mm-hmm.
so public, private K-12. And also the kind of professional development organizations, educational conferences, and kind of community support groups. Really, there's like a lot of different organizations within education as a unit that are interested in BetaBox.
Gotcha.
But the key challenge is often always going to be that funding piece. Back to the use case that we talked about in the higher education level, is like, who's going to pay for this and how can we convince them?
Mm-hmm.
So what we've started to do, or what we started to experiment with, is basically separating the location of where the experience is happening, or where the rental is taking place, from the person that's actually paying for it. And so we started to actually begin pitching companies, like corporate social responsibility departments at companies, to basically partner with us to support these educational programs and basically deploy interesting, engaging, fun, hands-on workshops in BetaBoxes, potentially co-branded, potentially just under our brand, maybe fully under theirs, kind of with us. And that worked super well. And now we do a number of these. So we are basically think of us as like, the hands-on, like, educational program, like infrastructure for a lot of these STEM companies. So we work with Capital One in the Richmond area to do like basically design thinking workshops for all girls college, or all girls high schools. I mentioned the Texas Instruments thing, which is more recruiting, and then there's some textiles companies that do manufacturing oriented, like, career development stuff in BetaBox. We do a lot of employee volunteerism, so a company can send their employees out. We'll train them on becoming a BetaBox expert so they can go learn how to teach these technologies to students. And basically, it's really good for the companies. They get all this great marketing and the employee volunteerism piece. And we do a good job kind of documenting like the metrics of how far actually is their money going. So we generate this whole report for them and we show, look, this is many students came through. This is how many impressions your brand got. And this is kind of like the value add. Here's a big media download package from the event. There's like some testimonies from parents and teachers and stuff students made. We give them this whole like package at the end. And so people, they really like it and they have the funds to do it and the need as well. And then basically we can go to schools now and say, look, you're going to get this experience. You're going to get it for free. So it's kind of a win-win on both sides. And it started to work so well that I can't talk a ton about it right now, but we're about to have this really cool press release come out where we're going to be doing what I just mentioned at a national scale all through 2017 for a multi-billion-dollar life sciences company where we're going to be co-designing some like very hands-on, making science and technology accessible. And it's going to be deployed a new city every week for the entire year. And it's going to ultimately result in like several 100,000 students going through our labs. So it's going to be real neat. So this like one, like basically it was like, it started as an email template to a different group of people and like some LinkedIn prospecting that turned into like a major, like a major huge contract.
Yeah.
And several others. So
that's awesome, man. And cool. By the time the show comes out, the press release might have already launched. So we'll link to in the show notes if so. Cool. Yeah. If not, stay tuned for where you can follow Sean at the end of the show here. But that's awesome, man. So you were just doing kind of some day-to-day sales with prospecting on people in the life sciences, and then it rolled into like, hey, this is a really cool thing. We want to do this across the country with hundreds of thousands of students.
Yeah, and I'm making it sound a little bit more like easier than it actually was. I mean, that particular opportunity took about a year for us to sort of develop, flesh out, and close, and now we're in the middle of delivering it, and getting it launched. But
the thing that I like to highlight in that is that you did take that opportunity, though. You didn't quit on, it wasn't just like. Okay, so I think sometimes people, they want those big contracts and they just think there's only like one way to get it, right? Mm-hmm. But there's not. I mean, you did, you hustled through and like found another way. Not that you were looking for this opportunity, but you were looking for other opportunities, hustled through just prospecting, and then an opportunity kind of like presented itself through your hustle, right? It wasn't like you were sitting around doing nothing. You had to be out there doing stuff. And then, I see like this is a great opportunity. Let's open this door and see what's behind it and work on that 6 months, 8 months, a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think this is actually a really important, one of your questions leading up to this interview was just kind of like a lesson or something that you learned from failure in this year. And actually it's probably helpful if I talk for a few minutes about this aspect, because actually while this large contract that we've had come in is almost a bit of a red herring, because for the majority of the year, actually, I would say that we were failing as a sales organization from a strategic perspective. So what I mean by this is we focused way too heavily on what we call whales, like these big contracts. And this is like the more I talk about this, everyone is like, yes, we go through that too. And because these whales, these big contracts where if you get them, everything's amazing, but they're unlikely to actually get, they're exciting. The conversations you have around them are cool. The numbers have a lot of zeros on them. And so everything is all exciting. And it's a lot more fun to sort of chase whales, be Captain Ahab versus the base hits. The simple school that's going to pay $3 or $4K for like a couple days for a rental, right? Like that's just, and then somebody put it to me recently, the base hits help you eat and the whales make you rich. So what we did is we focused way too heavily on whales this year compared to last year. Like last year, we focused just on base hits. We didn't get any whales, but we had pretty good sustainable revenues throughout the year. And then this year, revenues was like more scattered all over the place. We were definitely in the earlier part of the year underperforming our targets. We were focusing way too heavily on whales, and we lost track of the bread and butter that was making us successful. We almost got like a little bit egotistical, I would say, around this issue. And and through the summer we have like through the summer was like a particularly like poor sales time, and we doubled down on the being very process oriented on our base hits. So just getting email lists together, sending those things out, automated follow-ups, and just constant like check-ins, and having specific KPIs around different components of our sales process, and to try to like make corrective changes to like our one pagers and emails, and just see all the basic stuff that you need to do. And we did start to get back up to the single base hit numbers that we wanted to be at. And then we happened to get lucky by closing this whale. And the way we did that is it actually wasn't too dissimilar from like the way we did the base hits and stuff. We just kind of kept, and it wasn't really me running the main part of this thing. It was my colleague Greg, but he just kept that relationship warm with the decision maker over there. He just sent, if we would get a random article, he would send it along. Hey, we had this article written about us, and little stuff, just kind of keeping the relationship warm, just managing that relationship. And for a while, it looked totally dead. And these things always look totally dead, like until they're not. So you got to kind of just keep your stakes in the fire. And at one point, we actually got a definite no at one point. We're like, nope, this isn't going to happen. We don't have a budget for it. We want to do it. We don't have a budget. Sorry. And we were like, and then we still just kept going with it. And then something, the gears turned over there. They ended up having a budget that they could crop out for it. And then all of a sudden we've got this like great project. So
can we talk about that specific case real quick? Because in sales, a lot of times, at least in real estate, like you go until you get a no, and then you like put them on like an email list. What was the sales process like after they said no? Were you still asking them like, do you want to do this, or was it more subtle? What was the conversation like?
Yes, I think that that one that one was like a no. So there's two types of no's. There's probably more than that, but there's the no, like, no, this is stupid, we just don't want it. And that's probably the thing where you want to kill that fast. Like you don't want to spend too much time focusing on something that just fundamentally doesn't want. Like
no need to convince someone of a great idea that plenty of people have already bought into.
Exactly. Yeah, that's like a huge mistake people make, is just spending. Yeah. Exactly. You gotta go with what people want. Like,
right.
You don't have what people want, they're not gonna
go find the people that want it. They're already sold on it. Just
totally. Yeah. And if they need tools to like convince other people to also want it, kind of like we talked about a little bit earlier, then maybe you could build some of those tools. But whether that's like a good example is like an ROI calculator on your website or something, like here's why it's valuable, and then you can have the person that already wants it sell it to the people that aren't convinced yet. But anyway, the other type of no is like no because of some like logical reason, like that could change. Like the underlying assumption of that no might change. And in this case, the underlying assumption was no, they don't have the funds, but they do have the enthusiasm to do it. And so it's the kind of thing where, well, that is a no. They don't have the funds, but the thing is that over time, the underlying assumption could change.
It's like no, not yet.
Yeah, it's like what every investor is going to tell you.
Or no right now.
No right now. Yeah.
And
so then and then it was just some simple. And so it's like very like once we got that, it was like close to 0% of our time and energy went into it, except for one little email from our sales guy to them, sending off an article saying, "Oh, I hope it's going well over there." Not even so much as a. At this kind of scale, it's not like a sales tactic thing that's going to win it. It's just like you're just have a conversation. You're just like, you have a relationship with that other person outside of the context of trying to sell them something, if possible. And then it becomes kind of comes easy where once they actually do have the funds kind of open up, that you're the one in mind.
I think that's one of the hardest things to come to as a salesperson. And I've only done sales for myself, not for like a company. So I'm sure it's more difficult from that standpoint, but you have to really build, like you said, that relationship that's not just, hey, I'm a sales rep trying to sell you, so I'm going to keep contacting you and sending you articles about us. It has to be like more of the value prop that a lot of really good salespeople talk about, where it's, hey, I think like, I know you, we've talked quite a bit. I think this might be of value to you. I don't care if you've already bought the product or already told me to F off. Like, I'm just maintaining the relationship. Just like if I were to send Sean an article about something cool that I thought he might be interested in, right? I'm not trying to sell him anything. It just we have a relationship.
You have like an
Going to
actual,
something.
yeah, like the best way to like sell is to like actually give a crap about the thing that you're selling, and
Right.
then actually give a crap about the other person. Like
Yes.
those are the main two things. Like if you,
That's all you need to know about sales.
yeah,
You will win if
yeah,
you understand those two things.
yeah, and if you understand and then actually like do those two things, where
Do them.
it's
Yeah.
not like you pretend that you like the product and you pretend that you like the person. You fundamentally have to actually like those two things. Yeah.
So it sounds like you have a team of like 50 people over there. Who's working on this team at BetaBox?
Definitely not 50 people. So, so a little bit of an arc of this year is at one point we were 7 full-time people, and then through that, and then a network of about 20 on and off part-time BetaBox experts, and then in the summer I had kind of went through we had a pretty dark summer where we had to realize that like our current business model, our current revenues are like not sustaining these salaries, and then also like the particular and like the particular output. I'd say this is a failure on like that number 7 is actually was more than we needed, and then I'd say there's 2 takeaway lessons that worth highlighting. There is one, I think I was trying to design too much for scale, so I think I was trying to over design for what we needed a year from now versus what we needed like today. And then the second thing was I was trying to make and this is definitely not true like everyone in this organization, but have a little bit of a sense that I was trying to make like B players A players in a few instances, and that's possible sometimes, but it takes a lot of additional kind of like management time, and the and that doesn't always work out. So like it's sometimes easier to get you can choose between getting like knowing somebody's a B player and getting a B player and paying for a B player, so you're probably cheaper, and try to like through the high quality like structure of your organization, focus on the skills of that person, not the weaknesses, and like make them the most like useful possible. Sometimes that's the right approach, but then other times the right approach is like you really need an A player, and you need to pay like it's an A player. So that's another one of those art things, is knowing when can you be more efficient with your capital on a payroll perspective. When can you be more efficient with your capital because you just need like a single point solution and find someone with a good strength and just make sure they don't do so much related to where they're more weak, they're weaker. But when do you really need somebody that is, top notch?
The top.
Yeah.
So how do you learn all these things? I mean, it sounds like in the 2 years or so that you've been working on BetaBox Labs, you've like mastered human resources and sales and product design and all these things. What was your experience before BetaBox that brought you here? I mean, is some of this from past projects that you've worked on, or is it just all learning as you go?
Was 100% all learning as I go. I mean, when I've always been kind of a tinkerer, making little organizations and groups and clubs and stuff like that. But in terms of actually creating companies, I mean, I've gone I had no idea about anything like a few years ago. But I have a ton of. I think this is true of any craft or art form or science or whatever. If you have a high interest in the thing, and it's okay if you're starting with like very low base knowledge if your rate of learning is high. And this is what I tell every new employee and like team member and just other friends and people at coffees. Like the main thing, and the way I frame it with employees is like compare your rate of learning to the rate of growth of the company. And if your rate of learning is higher than or equal to the rate of growth of the company, you will continue to like be elevated within the company, and you'll continue kind of accrue responsibility over time. However, if your rate of learning is lower than the rate of growth of the company, and then you will probably be like you probably stay more stagnant and be replaced by somebody like above you, right? And the same is true like a founder, right? So if your rate of learning is lower than that of your growth of your company, right? So the particular situation where this would apply is let's say you raise several like $1 million, all of a sudden the expected growth rate of your company as put to you by your external investors is going to be very, very high. And it's going to be almost, especially if you're a first-time founder, almost impossible to like perfectly execute like multiple disciplines like yourself So you have to find people, and that does open you up to risk, because what happens is if you don't really understand a particular aspect of your company or your job, or just the jobs in general that need to be performed by like your leadership team or whatever, um, it's going to be kind of hard to hire the right person because you don't exactly know like what that thing fundamentally is. You just have ideas about what a, director of sales is, or like revenue officer or whatever. So I just try to actually do the job until I just can't physically take it anymore because I'm doing too much stuff. And then like once I just fully understand the job at every level, and like talk to people that understand, that have done it in other places, and then sort of apply my own like biases towards like which different opinions people have, and sort of craft like, okay, this is kind of like my mental framework of what a successful person in this role should be. And I just try to look out to like my like local network and to see if there's anyone similar, if there's anybody that's interested in the job, and then try to like fill that role with somebody. But through that process of just like having to like, it's like feeling like I have this like, it's almost like from a place of trying to like respect the person I put there, that I actually know what the hell their challenges and problems are, so that I can effectively support them. It's almost like from that place where I want to like fully understand the job. And I think in the short term, this mentality can feel like it comes off as almost like too much like over controlism or like micromanagement or whatever, but it's really, and potentially it could be perceived that way, but I see it more as like I'm trying to fully understand something, and then once I understand it, it can then be given to someone else, and then I'm left with more of an understanding and more empathy towards like that role. So I can, and then it helps with like shorthand too, where I understand where they're coming from. Anyway, long-winded thing where basically I just feel like I have to like learn everything at least once in order to move forward. And like when I was like first incorporated stuff, I thought there was this company that, like, just to give you a sense of how little I knew about business when I got started a couple of years ago, is we incorporated this company, and then I got a call like a day or two later from some weird company called like Dun& Bradstreet, and I was like, what the heck is this company? Like, is this a scam? I didn't even know. Like, I didn't know what it was. Like, and like that's like just like an indicator of, wow, you had no idea about anything. But you just learn that stuff, read articles. One specific place where I've gotten a lot of wisdom is the Stanford eCorner podcast series. That's like a really amazing library of wisdom from past
Stanford eCorner.
Yeah, the Stanford eCorner is really good.
Okay, we'll link to that in the show notes. And it's like other founders out in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, it's basically, just insert name of founder that you admire, and they've probably given this hour-long video talk on Stanford eCorner. And they have a YouTube channel. I think they have an app and a podcast. And it's actually run by this woman, Tina Seelig, who's an advisor to our company and is just one of the most phenomenal people.
Nice.
So that's a great like resource to pick up.
Cool.
A lot of the nuances and context stuff that you don't read in a book.
Yeah, and that's what I love about podcasts and YouTube videos and stuff, is they can really dive deep on a book. It's weird because books usually are meant to dive deep on things, but a lot of times they brush over a lot of things to like encompass a goal, like an overlying message, But YouTube videos have the ability to talk about just like one aspect of a startup, like not even raising capital, but like how to find someone that might give you capital for like an hour and a half,
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, totally.
So, okay, we've talked about a lot. You're given like gold. Like this could be a whole podcast series. I feel like is just interviewing Sean Maroni here, because you have a lot of experience but you've learned. I mean, more than just having the experience. You've learned a lot from all of these things, and it's super impressive from my end over here. What's the roadmap look like for BetaBox right now? We've talked about it a little bit, but what does it look like?
So I have a blog post out there that kind of shows what the roadmap is, but basically it's like 4 steps, and it starts with like our overall sort of like a mission of the company, right? So we haven't talked like super like broadly about the mission yet, so it's probably worth touching on. But basically, overall, the company itself is just all about eliminating the friction between like the tools people need to create and those actual people. The belief is that technology, if done right, is a tool of like democratization of access to opportunity, right? But actually what I would say is in many cases, especially in our current like pretty like highly siloed academic community, and then also like corporations too, what tends to happen is it's like a rich to the richer feedback loop, where any new technology that comes online, let's just use 3D printers to carry us through the example. When a new 3D printer comes online, right, it's usually a little bit higher cost. The more well-off organizations, both in education and corporate, tend to get those first, and then all of the new innovations happen with that are possible with that new tool at those organizations. And then over time, that starts to like depreciate and no longer become the newer thing. And it's usually at that time that costs start to come down, and then lower income like communities and schools and organizations and everything can then actually acquire those tools.
Mm-hmm.
All the interesting innovations may potentially have already been created at that point. And this is true of like any new technology, whether it's like even thinking back to like early days of Homo sapiens. I'm reading this amazing audiobook right now called Sapiens, and it's talking about this. So it's on the mind, but basically,
Nice.
If if you're fighting someone with like a bow and arrow, you're going to, be able to do way better than let me give a non-war example. So like, it's you can make like a basket or whatever by hand, but if you had like a loom, you can make a basket way faster, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is like true today. If you have an access to advanced equipment, you can be on like the cutting edge of innovation, right? Anyway, what tends to happen is people don't have those opportunities, and a lot of times, especially in the education system, kids don't even know that like a thing is a thing. Like a lot of kids don't even still know what a 3D printer is. Like they don't have an experience with an Oculus Rift. They don't know how to laser cut something, even if it's simple as like a coaster. They don't know about, they haven't looked through a microscope. It's like just simple, basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that what you'll find in startup world is once you know what to Google, like once you know what cap table is or vesting schedule or whatever term it is that you come across, once you know what to Google, you can find a book, you can find a video, you can figure it out from there, right? But if you don't know what to Google, how the hell are you going to know that you want to be an engineer, for example?
Right.
So if you don't know that that's a thing. So a big value that BetaBox has, especially within the experience business, is just that first exposure so some kid in the middle of like rural North Carolina can walk in, see what a 3D printer is, and just be like, oh wow, that's a thing, that's cool, I'm kind of mesmerized by this, let me learn more. And we're within the experience business trying to hit 1 million experiences, 1 million of those exposures by 2020. And we're like not there at all. We're at like 10,000, just over 10,000 right now. But we should be able to methodically get there if we double in size every year. So that's kind of our goal within experiences, to hit that million. And we're doing that just by building more labs, by creating more programs, both nationally and then hopefully internationally as well, because there's a ton of need and demand for these exposures of new technologies, and not just the technologies we have now. I'm talking about all sorts of
new technologies and stuff. Yeah. So one mission is ridding the world of these like technology deserts that you talk about in your blog. And we'll link to the blog post in the show notes. It's a really interesting piece that Sean's put together here. And then you have these like these patterns of that suppress creative technology too, right? So in one arm, there's like just the access to it in general is hard to get people to know even what the hell to look for. But then there's also the suppressive side of the creative technology. Can you talk about those factors a little bit too?
Oh yeah, like the various things that sort of like make it less likely for these technologies to sort of come into play.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, it's in the blog, but I'm just curious, like where those things, you don't have to talk about specifics because people can read the blog post, but where do you like, how do you figure those things? How do you figure BetaBox can cure those things?
Sure. Yeah. So, so the key thing that sort of BetaBox solves is we try to figure out like try to figure out the access from every perspective. So from a geographic perspective, we've kind of cracked the code of access because we can literally put an advanced solar powered internet producing lab in the middle of anywhere. Like we could do a BetaBox event in the middle of like a park, or we could even do it in the middle of on like top of a mountain. Like we can do them really anywhere. So geographically, like that's how we solve that, right? So you don't have to necessarily be you don't have to be at like an advanced university to like have these tools. Like we can put the tools anywhere.
Can I get one nitty gritty piece out? Because you say it has internet in there. What are you using for internet?
Basically, it's the same systems that the phones use, just like 4G 4G systems. We use Orbcom as our vendor for that.
Nice. Okay.
It's fast internet. Like probably like 50 megabits or something, depending on the area.
Nice.
And so then like financially is another huge hurdle. So like, how do you solve it? How do you solve the access financially? So a big we're by turning what's usually a CapEx, usually an expensive capital expenditure to acquire advanced technologies that many organizations can't afford, especially the ones that trend towards kind of the more rural side. We've turned it into an OpEx. So you can just rent all of this stuff right now. And then on top of that, we've figured out how to get other companies to fund your OpEx. So it's literally free. And then on top of that, we're actually also pretty soon we're going to launch this funding marketplace where schools can post like profiles of like how they want to get a BetaBox and like similar to like almost like Donors Choose, how they want to get a BetaBox, what they would do with it. And then like we're going to have companies basically be able to like fund those. That's basically we're creating our own Kickstarter specifically for our product.
That's awesome.
So we're trying to make it as easy as possible to acquire this thing. And then it kind of solves a lot of the issues that I linked to in the blog post.
This is really cool, man. I mean, I think, the blog post is really cool to read. I've read it a couple of times now. So,
thanks, man.
It's one of those like products that you see that could like really just change a lot of things with technology and like the diversity, you hear about with, it's all things, but just for anyone who's listening, like people that grew up in an urban area or like the suburbs and you just have access to computers all day, like it's not necessarily across the board, and giving access to lasers and 3D printers and all these cool gadgets to an 8-year-old in rural North Carolina is like, that could be the next Elon Musk that's living there. Right. But if he didn't have access to that, like he might just grow up and be like a manager at Walmart otherwise or something, not to downplay Walmart. But.
Yeah. And then the thing about it is like why I think it's useful to have something like some sort of deployment mechanism like this for this type of, I'm not necessarily I personally think like science and engineering and not just science and engineering, but also design and art, just the making of new things, whatever that is like a critical thing that everyone should have like basic literacy in. But like that doesn't need necessarily disparage like other cool careers, right? But let's compare like this in sports, right? So the thing with, you don't need a BetaBox for like the NFL, right? Because the NFL is everywhere. And if you you are the particular, like one issue I have is like, whether this is like the women in STEM or diversity or whatever it is, like we should, or even just kids that are good at math that you're driving them into a STEM profession, like kids need to naturally be interested in the thing, right? Don't just try to like fit a quota by just like convincing kids that science and engineering is good. Like if a kid that goes into science and engineering, that should really be the next like like Tom Brady, like can do that, right? Like it could be right. Like he should go, he or she should go a different direction. But anyway, like there's plenty of examples of like role models for sports as an example, if that's what you want to pursue, and that's awesome. There's just I find fewer hands-on opportunities in the science and engineering side, so catching those kids through stuff like this is important, just because there's like less examples of that stuff already. But yeah, it's not. But to your point, it's not just again about like hitting quotas or whatever. It like literally makes everyone's life better if everyone has the opportunity to come up with new inventions and things, because like the best breakthrough ideas always come from like the peripheral, some weird thing that like no one ever thought of, because someone is applying a new perspective to an industry that has like just not been thought of in that way. Like somebody brings it's just like the way it works. Like you can read innovation after innovation, whether that's like germ theory or like spectacles. Like there's so many different stories of somebody just looked at something for not even that long, and just realized that some unique perspective that they had, some disparate thing, can be applied to some industry that totally reframes the way that field is sort of like thought of, and that's just how it works. And then like if you have advanced tools to actually kind of make those things more tangible, like it definitely radically increases the probability that we'll get new disruptive innovations to sort of like enter into society that we can all benefit from. So.
Definitely. I love it. So it's like the Steve Jobs approach to taking a calligraphy class at Stanford, which we've talked about a bunch of times on the show here, where you're putting yourself in another environment that's not whatever is your normal environment, and then trying to get something out of that and bring it back into your environment, right? Chef Kyle Bailey, episode 13 on the show here too, talked about it, where he tells his cooks to go to art museums on their days off just to learn artistic inspiration. And then they bring it back to the kitchen, and they had this time outside of the kitchen with no food to just gather other inspiration, right? So it's the same kind of mindset where you're putting yourself outside of your career path or whatever, and just drawing from other forms of inspiration. It opens your mind.
Yeah.
What are some things you do to boost creativity or just inspire yourself outside of like the STEM world?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, this kind of thing, this thing of like connecting disparate ideas is just kind of like how, just kind of like how human minds work. One example, I have a lot of like little things that'll I like try to boost creativity. One that I'm thinking about is just like diffuse mode versus focus mode, like just having the self-awareness of like when are you in like diffuse mode, so versus focus mode. So like diffuse mode is that feeling like when you wake up in the morning and kind of like there's all these ideas bouncing around, you're not really thinking about anything in particular, you're kind of like, you know, blurry vision for the mind, right, where things can kind of connect more quickly. And just like obviously like basic stuff like having a notebook around and like doing some stuff so you kind of catch on to those things. And then you hear those stories about like who was it? Was it like Thomas Edison that would like fall asleep while holding some marbles, and then when the marbles dropped, he would like try to hold on to his ideas that he was just having to like stick with them. I don't know. One that maybe more that maybe I do that might be a good thing for, especially if you're just doing like pure software, to consider is, look, like humans, we grew up in the physical world, right? So like it's often can be helpful to use like physical world analogies to spark creative thinking, even if it's on like the pure software side. So this probably won't make any sense at all, but I was recently screwing in a bolt, and it made me have an idea about like our compensation structure for our sales team. Like those two things like I don't make any sense together. And I don't know.
How did it make sense to you?
To be honest with you, I don't fully remember why, like what sparked about it, but I was just like screwing this large like hexagonal head bolt, and then I was thinking, and basically for some reason that made me think of making like a flat commission structure instead of like a staggered one. It doesn't make any sense. Like I'm not going to be able to like reconnect the dots, but basically like a lot of times physical world things can jar more abstract concepts loose.
And I think also we talk about like exercise and meditation and dreaming and stuff.
Totally.
Just how removing yourself from your own mind and like focusing on something else, whether it be physical exertion, like exercise, or complete mindlessness, or how close to mindlessness, like meditation. It's just that sense of like your subconscious is at play. Maybe that's what sparked, like you had all these ideas on how to fix the sales structure, and then you started doing something that was like removing yourself from everything.
Yeah.
And it just like, it snapped into place.
Yeah, that's totally true. It just, and it may be like, maybe another thing is, you know, because our subconscious is always working on the little problems that we have in life. So, so there's this phrase, what is it? Negative capability is like a cool phrase, and basically it's the definition of that is one's ability to basically hold a paradox in your mind and not be too stressed out, is my version of the definition. So like Albert Einstein held this paradox of space of basically the speed of light, and basically like what happens if you're going the speed of light, like, and looking at a beam of light, like what happens, right? Like that seems like it's not possible. And like he held this paradox in mind for like 10 years, and then like Eventually, like his subconscious figured it out. But anyway, like basically, if you're hit with like something in a conversation that's like seems like an issue, or you don't know how to come to terms with it, maybe it's not the right answer to sort of solve it immediately. Maybe you can just put it on the table, because we get so caught up in like a big thing I've done recently is like turn off all of my push notifications except for phone calls. I don't even get text messages. I have to go look in the app, and like just everything else, like all social media and stuff.
That's what I should do. I've just been putting it on airplane mode, but then you miss calls, which is not good.
Yeah.
But it lets you disconnect.
Yeah, this approach has its challenges too, because occasionally I do, especially the text messages thing does actually, to be honest, become a problem. But whatever.
What do you guys use for intercommunication between your employees and
we use
Slack and team? Slack. Okay.
Yep. Good stuff. Yeah, we use Slack. And then anyway, but yeah, we're the constant culture of like everything needs an answer just like immediately, right? And I am usually online all the time, but I'm trying to get better at like being respectful of like, okay, not everybody wants to work all the time. And so when I do send,
no, we don't respect those people. Get out of here.
I do, so like other people and stuff, I'll send them like, I'll just make sure if it's like, a time, if I don't really need an answer right away, I'll make sure to let them know like, hey, like don't worry about this until like later. But actually those gap times probably allow your subconscious to like just come up with interesting, unintuitive answers to things.
Yes.
And yeah, you were talking about like the meditation and stuff. That stuff's all great, good to do.
And you even count that, like, I don't even see it as like being away from whatever work I'm doing. Like that's necessary. The exercise for an hour is like necessary for me to be productive throughout my day, or like eating healthy is necessary. Like if I don't do that, it's not like, I don't even see it as taking myself away from like potential work that I could be doing. It's like, no, I need this, or else like no work's going to get done effectively. Yeah. And you have to know yourself. Like people can crank for 20 hours a day on like whatever Taco Bell and stuff and no exercise and just like cranking, but just know yourself. Like you might need an hour of exercise and like some healthy proteins to get going. You just have to understand who you are and how your body works and your mind.
Yeah. And another slightly unrelated piece that could be helpful is, and this is slightly dubious advice, especially for me, somebody who likes to start a lot of things, but not always necessarily like finish them as a natural tendency that I like work against. And I'm actually thinking about that recently. Like I've actually been doing BetaBox for a while now, compared to other people that are like switching jobs all the time. So maybe I've officially outgrown that weekness. I don't know.
Found it.
To have one side project, like one small side project, could be a good thing, because you can start to while you're focused on your side project, you can see your main project through an outsider's lens, like when you come back to it sometimes. So like I as a side project created like a co-working space called The Nest in Raleigh, and it was cool to sort of create this other business and like launch it and get it rolling in steady state, and like it ended up being much more not so much a side project, more like a project, more than I expected. But it was kind of cool to kind of learn this whole other industry and like what lessons over there can be applicable to the main thing. But it's good to have a side project, even if it's small. I also at one point another side project was I made like a Kanye West Slack bot that would tell me inspirational Kanye West quotes. So they don't have to all be like world changing.
Yeah, there's plenty of room for funny stuff. Chuck Cadiz, who's the founder of the BetaBox, he's on the show here. He made this like coffee, kind of going off of Obama O's from Brian Chesky and the Airbnb founders. Yeah. He made Hillary, I think they called it the Billary blend, and like Dunkin' Democrats. He had two different coffees. He just kind of like did it for fun and sold it online. But and he runs the BetaBox. It was just a little side project he did.
Yep. Yeah, I've got some friends. They did a Facebook. They made a Facebook page. Sometimes side projects turn into huge things. Like they made a Facebook page about like lost pets or something in Raleigh, and they've built like they've actually turned it into a startup that does really good. They do really well. They've got great revenues off of basically finding people's lost pets, like for money via Facebook.
That's genius.
Yeah, it's actually awesome.
Those are the coolest. To me, those are really interesting businesses because you fall into them without even thinking it's going to be a business. It's just like purely inspired by your curiosity, and then it's like, oh, we could make a business out of this. Let's do it. So, yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, we could probably keep talking for hours, but I want to transition into Genie's Grind and come back for the hustle round. Can you stick around for a few more minutes for the hustle round?
Yeah, sure thing.
Awesome. That's just for editing purposes. So we're not actually going to go off the Genie's grind.
Yeah.
But yeah, dude, this is awesome. I'm so glad that Elliot put us in touch, and I can totally see how you guys get along because you both have these big ideas, but not just the ideas. You're actually like taking action on them, which is cool. So,
totally, man. I appreciate that. What are some of your? I'm always just kind of curious, like with like, what are some of your goals for like the podcast, and like what do you feel like you're kind of doing it for and getting out of it?
Yeah, I mean, funny enough that you mentioned like side projects, because so I'm in real estate and I'm also in school. So the podcast,
real estate or residential, or
I'm in residential right now, which I think is a good avenue to learn sales and just like relational stuff with the mind of eventually getting into commercial after I graduate college. So yeah, I mean, I was in real estate, a couple of other real estate agents in my firm. We wanted to network with other young people that were just doing cool stuff. There's a lot of old people in real estate. So we like got together, like, how can we make this happen? We didn't want to do like a coffee meetup because there's already plenty of those for us to go to. So we all listened to podcasts and we're like, hey, let's just like launch a podcast. We can talk to cool people. We can help share their story and we can just network and get to talk to some cool people and learn from each other, which is the big thing. It's just like bouncing ideas back and forth and learning from other people. So that's where it stemmed from. And since then it's grown into, we've only been doing it for like 3 months. We're 13 episodes in. We have another 25 or so recorded that'll launch one a week. And yeah, I mean, now it's just like sparked my interest in creating more media and sharing people's stories and trying to build some kind of community with people to connect with, you know. So like you and Elliot, you know, Elliot calls you out on the show and then it's like, all right, cool. We're gonna talk to Rashawn now. And then I don't know. And then like the other week I connected Elliot with this guy who does YouTube cooking because Elliot expressed some interest in like seeing if this guy wanted to try spirulina. So I connected them and like they're chatting and they're like, you know, we're going to keep each other like on our feet and on our toes with inspiration and all this stuff. So just like that kind of connecting dots with people is fucking sweet.
Yeah. Agreed.
And yeah, so for me, I mean, like personally for me, besides the networking, just like learning more about media and marketing and really focusing on how to optimize different marketing tasks so that I can take it into my real estate career and eventually like long-term development and sustainable development and building tangible communities in the real world with real estate projects, not just like apartments, but like things that people can live in and breathe and learn from each other. So kind of big pictures. I'm still in school too. So that's something that's taken up some time except for during the breaks here. So I'm definitely excited to get out and just crank on everything full time.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah. Where'd you go to school, by the way? Did you go to UNC?
I went to NC State.
NC State. Okay. I saw that in your LinkedIn. That's cool.
Yeah. If you're ever down in like Raleigh area, love just kind of show you. Raleigh's super hot for like real estate too. Right now it's like exploding. And like, I know a bunch of like, I'm working with a tenant rep right now on a warehouse space that I'm probably about to sign on.
Is that for like making the labs and
we got to start doing some, so we needed a new space and, I'm probably going to do that. It's funny because this time last year is when I signed the deal on, the thing I just mentioned, the Nest. It's like this like 10,000 square foot co-working space. And I did that like pretty much today last year. And now I'm probably within the next few days going to do another kind of real estate related thing. So it's some sort of like alignment around Christmas, I guess. But man. I can just kind of show you around the area, whatever, if you're ever in town.
Definitely. I'll have to make a trip. I mean, Raleigh, that whole tech sector with the, what do they call it? Like Silicon, what do they call it?
We just call it, I mean, like the triangle is what we just call it, the triangle. I think, I don't know if there is a name. I don't know if there is like a Silicon kind of name for it or not. There's a lot of stuff going on. I've been, it is a pretty cool place. And there's a good overlap between like cool people, low cost of living, and like access to like talented people around, I guess, but and like decent amount of like events and things. And universities where you can pull talent and
exactly, stuff. That's awesome. I think like anytime there's a university around, that's the starting for something big in terms of a tech scene. You know, I talked to a lot of people from Athens, Georgia too, randomly There's like a pretty good tech scene down in
Oh,
Athens,
wow.
and just because there's a huge university there,
Yeah,
So
totally.
anytime there's like that pool of talent, you're gonna get it. And NC State that's a big tech school too. There's a lot of engineering programs down there.
Yeah, and then you've got Duke and Durham nearby and stuff. So yeah, there's
Mhm.
a lot of cool stuff happening. I'll probably be there for. I didn't know much about the area when I moved down there, but now it's pretty cool. So yeah,
It's your place. It's your place now.
it's a good like home based place. Like I spend like I'll be in San Francisco for like 2 weeks in January. Because we're putting a lab there, so I'll be there for a while
Nice.
getting that set up and going. But it's a good like the Triangle is a good home base place, and you can go to like those top markets like for like travel and short term amounts of time. It's good. It's good to have like clients in those areas and like pay people in the secondary.
In the a little bit less expensive market, yeah.
Yeah,
For now at least. That's cool, man. I love that. And the world we live in makes it more transient to do something like that too.
yeah, totally.
So, which is why like where Elliot is too in Richmond, same kind of idea with the university there and stuff. Have you visited his labs at all or anything there?
I personally haven't been to his labs. Two other dudes in BetaBox went and hung out with him.
Oh, really?
He came to Raleigh recently and like was at some networking event with the community manager at the Nest, and like I didn't even like know about it. It was weird. I was like, dude,
like what the fuck, dude?
Like what the hell, man?
Not even gonna tell me you're in town?
And like the crazy part is like he just met a random guy at a networking event, and he's like, oh, what's your name? Like, oh, my name's Tim. Like, Elliot is like, Tim, what do you do? Like, oh, I'm the community manager at this thing called the Nest. Like, wait, is that you work with Sean? And oh yeah, Sean started it. Oh, like we know him. And so
that's hilarious.
That kind of stuff.
That's hilarious. Yeah, Elliot seems to travel a lot for all kinds of meetups. He's going like, because he's in Richmond, I'm in Williamsburg.
Cool.
And then there's Norfolk. So he's like, he goes to Norfolk, he goes to Williamsburg, he goes to like Virginia Beach area. Sounds like he's going to Raleigh just to like,
yeah,
he's grinding, man. He's out there. He's out there.
Yeah. Elliot's cool, man. He's gonna pull that thing off, I think. And
yeah,
it's been cool to watch him. Like, it's been cool to watch him. Like, he went from just like super enthusiastic, no idea what he's doing, to like still as enthusiastic, but like also knows what he's doing now.
Which is tough because you get punched a few times. It's hard to keep the enthusiasm. Usually, you just get hardened, and now you're just like, now you just roll with everything, and you're not you don't seem as happy on the outside because you're like dead on the inside a little bit. But totally. That's cool. Yeah, he's both of you guys. Now that I've talked to you too, I'm excited to just like stay connected and see where you guys go.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
And just chat, man. It's awesome. So, okay, we can roll into the hustle round, and then we can chat a little bit after too if you have some time.
I'll have to roll out pretty soon, probably right after that. But yeah,
I should go too. My family's waiting for me at dinner, and I'm like, nah, this interview is going to work. So, okay, hustle round. So these are more fast-paced questions. Feel free to have more long-form answers if you want. So, what quote or piece of advice is on your mind?
What quote or piece of advice is on my mind? I was reading an article. I'm just going to say like first things I think of. So I was reading an article this morning about just like limiting decisions, like Zuckerberg with his t-shirts and Obama with the suits and stuff. I guess I'm just thinking more about like life automation stuff, just limiting the number of decisions you make throughout the day and thinking of willpower as like a finite resource that reduces with every decision that you make. That's some advice I'm pondering today.
Nice. I love it. Yeah, it's you see it with Zuckerberg and Steve Jobs with the turtlenecks.
Yep, totally.
Limiting those things. What is a recent accomplishment that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I would say a recent accomplishment that I'm most proud of is being able to just doing things for the right reason. Like when something goes good for the right reason. So like this was a really small when you see the system working, I'm really proud of when the system starts to actually work. And one particular example is this a nice little rental that we got booked last week. Was 100% a product of like a new upgraded like lead gen to sales like system, and it worked well, and like the sort of team that kind of came together to pull it off. So I guess like that's just kind of a general answer, but when you see the system that you create, like actually like get to a level where it starts to produce in somewhat of an like automated way, or the work the way it's supposed to, with like a little bit less human intervention, it starts to feel like, oh, this is actually like a thing that can grow.
It's very satisfying.
Yep.
It's like as satisfying as a revenue goal or something.
Yeah, totally. Like even like all that, any like customer interaction can always be like satisfying. Like even when you get validation from the world of like some crazy idea is like actually a thing they want, that's always good.
Yeah, someone besides your grandma, your mom, or
Yep.
your aunt or something.
Yeah. It's like, oh, you actually want this. Okay, cool.
Awesome. What is an influencer that you've been obsessing about, or who's an influencer you've been obsessing about recently?
Yeah, I've been catching up on a bunch of Stoicism stuff. I love Stoicism, and was recently listening to DHH was on a Tim Ferriss podcast recently. That was pretty good, and they touched on a bunch of Stoicism. And then Ryan Holiday's new book is pretty good. So I've been reading a bunch of Marcus Aurelius and Seneca and those folks. And yeah, I guess that would be a good influencer.
Nice. Ryan Holiday and DHH, both guests on Tim Ferriss's show. We'll find the episodes and link to them. And Stoicism, just like philosophy of simplicity, basically, right?
Yeah, simplicity, like tranquility and usefulness, optimizing for those things. In life.
Awesome. Yeah, I am fascinated by a lot of the concepts. I'm so ADD that I try to implement at least like some parts of it, with simplicity. Yeah. I love his idea, Tim Ferriss. He says that he eats like rice and beans for a few days every month or something like that, or like he does some crazy things that are in his self-experimentation mindset, and they're cool to implement.
Yeah, totally. Basically, it's like one of the more powerful, like a good hack is like the negative visualization hack, where you basically like think of bad stuff in your life to give you context for when good things happen. That's a good hack from Stoicism. And just another kind of like takeaway is like, if you think of is like the ability to kind of like stand in what I would call like the jungle. So I went through this recently with like thinking about from like a financial, like from a fundraising perspective, like how much money do I want BetaBox to raise? How much control do I want to give up? And like, is that the right thing for BetaBox? Because BetaBox is not really like a unicorn. It's like a good, really good, like really great, like cash flow, like linearly growing company. And what kind of investment does that lend itself, if any? And we did end up raising some money, but just thinking through all that stuff, and then diving into that like echo chamber of startup land, where like you as like a CEO have to sort of sell what's not quite there yet all the time, and you have to sort of like be careful not to drink your own Kool-Aid too much, and like kind of toe that line between confidence and egoism. And there's a lot of good stuff in Stoicism that can be applied to those types of situations.
What's a tip that you have used to help remain humble?
Yeah. Surround yourself with people that like don't drink your Kool-Aid, ask for like negative feedback all the time. Just making sure that like you're just like self-awareness around like why are you doing stuff. So if you're like focused on like money, and if you're just focused on like the money piece or the success piece, like vanity metrics, or just like impressing people with like cool numbers at like the next networking event you go to and everything, if you find yourself kind of like doing that, just ask yourself like, do those things even really matter? Like if you imagine your company as like a sandcastle, like that you're building right by the waves, right? Like you build this thing and like you put all this effort like building up this big sandcastle, and then like the waves are eventually going to wash it all away. Like no one's going to remember like what you made. Like it's not going to matter. Like so you better appreciate the process of actually building it, and be inspired and like interested in the things that you're learning, the people that you can meet. And if you just focus more on like those aspects of like, if I woke up tomorrow and this was all gone, like would I have regretted spending this time? If like it's like in a good tangible way for a founder is like, if this random number on this piece of paper that like says I own this much of this company and that means it's valued at this, like if that number is actually 0, like would I regret like or be bummed by that?
Mm.
And like, sure, you're gonna probably be a little bit bummed, but like if you can really be in a place where I just freaking love doing this, and
Mhm.
something good at the end of the day happens, and some big company says, "Hey, I want this," and then you're able to financially benefit from that, then hey, that's great. But if not, like you still need to appreciate the process and like hang your hat on that.
Right. And it's not to say that you don't care what happens. It's just to say that you appreciate what happens even more, because when you put it in that kind of context and say, you love what you're doing so much that the result, even though it matters, but it doesn't like act like you're just so happy with the process and understanding that you're in that so much more of the time than whatever goal or number could give you, that's the part that you really have to enjoy.
Yeah, totally. And it's like that's back to the thing of like, things that work like something that worked for like the right reasons. Like or if it's like even in like maybe an example would be like investing. Like so like,
Mm-hmm.
you can, if you stick to your principles and lose money, that's a lot better than not sticking to your principles and like making money, right? Like you need like a
Yeah.
system and a process and like yeah, and just like making sure you're tethering like the outcomes with like did this outcome happen because of like the actual work that I'm putting in worked, or was it just happenstance or chance? Yeah.
Nice. I love it, man. Okay, so we're out of the hustle round, moving into the weekly call out segment. This is a chance for our guests to call someone out, a fellow hustler, a fellow grinder that's out there hustling, who would be good to have on the show. Do you have anyone in mind?
Yeah, I challenge a Raleigh founder, Rebecca Holmes, CEO of Ella Raw. It's a raw foods company.
Awesome. I love food. I'm a avid foodie, so I'll definitely check out Rebecca's stuff and reach out to her. Cool, man. So, okay, wrapping things up here, what message do you have for the grinders out there?
Sure. Yeah. So what's your listener base? Like, is it startup folks, all sorts of different people? How would you characterize your listener?
It's startups, but it's also just people hustling, whether it be a musician or an artist. We have athletes come on from time to time. I'd say it's probably 75% entrepreneurs and startup people, and then 25% just young people hustling, doing something cool.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, just like whatever, like, don't be too, so just think back to like what you actually care about. Like what things did you do when you were a kid? What things do you procrastinate on when no one else is looking? Like, what are the things that you actually like want to like put into the world, and then just like get good at those things, and like always just like one step at a time. Like it's just like, many days where it's like you don't want to wake up, you don't want to do stuff like, you got some aspect like, maybe on the macro level you really love what you're doing, but on the specific thing that you have to do in that moment like just sucks and you don't want to do it. But just like, I don't know, just like you just get through it. And then the like piece of advice I heard recently along this line of like kind of procrastination and just like just doing what you start and finishing what you say you will and that kind of stuff is like the anxiety and the stress of like putting the thing off, of like seeing that thing on your to-do list just burning into that paper or whatever. That anxiety or that stress is often like way more than the actual pain of doing the work itself, even if the work sucks. So like, would you rather just like sit with this like tepid stress that's like eating away at you quietly of like, I know I haven't done this thing yet, or you just want to like suck it up, do the thing, you know just do the thing, whatever it is, I guess.
Thanks, man. That's good advice. I need to remind myself of that for most of my school assignments.
Oh yeah,
it's always so true. Like, just
example.
write the 8-page paper. Just get it over with. Don't stress about it for 3 days and then write it
Yep.
for 15 hours straight. Like, just
Yeah.
work away at it.
And maybe there's a way, and like there's probably little tactics within it, like, for something
Mhm.
really like sucky like that, like gamify it, be like this page, like structure rewards or something, like little
Right.
things like that. But ultimately it's like
Donuts at the end.
the only way forward is through the front door.
Definitely. That's awesome advice, man. Appreciate you saying that. So, where can grinders follow you in your story in BetaBox Labs?
Yeah, totally. So like I'm personally on Twitter, just Sean Maroni. Feel free to hang out on there. And obviously like our website is a good place for info. Probably the best two spots would be Twitter or Medium. I have a blog on Medium. We talk about a lot of the different things that are happening in BetaBox world. And people can just email me too, just Sean@betaboxlabs.com if they're interested in learning more about the company. We've got a couple open positions as well on the operations and sales side. And there's, of course, like the BetaBox expert program. So if people want to actually go out in the world, interface with schools, teach about 3D printing, laser cutting, or if you have some particular passion or skill that you think would apply in BetaBox world, just like hit us up, let us know, especially if you're in kind of this like southeast region of the country. But we're also looking at but also like St. Louis and Southern California. If you're in those areas, basically we're looking for people that want to get involved on a part-time basis in our education stuff.
Great stuff. Definitely reach out, Sean, follow his story. And yeah, man, I look forward to seeing where BetaBox goes next and where you go next. It's awesome, dude. It's really cool to get you on here and chat the details and the nitty-gritty. And thanks for being a guest on the show.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Carson. Hopefully it was helpful. And I really appreciate you having me on.
For sure. All right, man. We'll talk soon.
All right. Happy holidays.